Hi friends, Travis here. If you're new to the channel, I want to welcome you. And of course, if you've been here before, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to kind of compare and contrast what it's like to go on a cruise on a small ship versus a large mega ship and talk through some of the major differences so that maybe when you're booking your upcoming cruise, it's easier for you to select which ship is right for you. Callie, my assistant editor, is behind me as per usual, so we know it's going to be a good one. And if at any point you like what you see, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, all those things. And without any further delay, let's go ahead and move right on into the video. I'm going to break this up into two parts. We'll talk about small ships first, and then we'll talk about large ships, and then I'll kind of like close out at the end with some final thoughts. The first thing I want to talk about when it comes to small ships is that they tend to be older, but that also means that they're more intimate. I find that it's easier to make friends on smaller ships because you see the same people over and over again. For example, a couple of years ago when I was on Enchantment of the Seas, I started out as a solo cruiser and ended up in a group of like 15 people by the end of the sailing. I made so many friends that cruise that I'm still in contact with to this day. And the other part of that is you end up having more direct contact with the staff and crew. And I don't mean that you're not going to get that on the larger ships. Obviously, the larger ships have more crew members to accommodate for the larger amount of passengers, etc. But you'll end up interacting with the same crew members. And after the first day or two, they know you by name. They call you over. They genuinely want to make sure your cruise is going as good as it can. And they want to get to know you, etc. And I notice I don't get that as much on the larger ships. And the next thing is that even though the smaller ships are obviously smaller in size, they tend to go to more unique ports. If you book the right itinerary, you really can go to some unique places. The larger ships can't go to all of the ports. Like, for example, the Oasis class ships for Royal can't go through the Panama Canal, so they're limited in that aspect. They also can't go to some ports because they have to go under bridges and whatever, so the larger ships won't fit under those bridges, and so obviously can't go to those places. Key West is one of them, Jacksonville, and of course there are Caribbean ports and, places all over the world where the larger ships don't fit. So yeah, you're a lot more flexible on where you can go on a smaller ship, and I think that's a good thing. And the next thing is that while the smaller ships offer less amenities, you obviously can't fit a giant water park or roller coaster on top of a small ship. They tend to come in at a lower price point. Especially if you're savvy, you can get a longer cruise for the same price or cheaper than you would a shorter cruise on a bigger, newer ship. And that's in large part because the older ships are easier to maneuver, they're cheaper to operate, and things like that. So yeah. And another thing to point out about smaller ships is that entertainment is limited. You're going to have like live theater and live music and that sort of thing, but there's not going to be a whole lot more than that. They do have a lot of the typical activities like silent disco and deck parties and all of that. And you'll have a lot more trivias and arts and crafts and things like that that are easy to facilitate without a lot of technology and infrastructure, etc. And then the last thing is that while there will be fewer bars and venues on board, in my experience on the smaller ships, I get better service. Some of the smaller, older ships are renowned in the community, Grandeur of the Seas, Enchantment of the Seas. If you read the reviews on those ships, people love them because of how good the service is that they receive on board. I've experienced that myself on Enchantment of the Seas and others like it. The bartenders are top-notch, they're attentive, they're quick, and you really get that sort of Cheers vibe, that place where everybody knows your name. And I really enjoy that about the smaller ships. All right, now let's talk about the larger ships. I really do enjoy having all the bells and whistles, and it does create a different vibe and, a much more lively experience. But the first thing I want to talk about is that in my experience, it's harder to make friends on the newer, bigger ships. You'll meet someone on the first day and you'll vibe with them, and then it's possible you'll never see them again. That happened to us on Oasis of the Seas. I wish we would have had a longer sailing on that ship because it went by so quick and we never made friends and, barely explored even a small portion of that huge vessel. So yeah, and the next thing is that more amenities also means more expensive. Unless you're savvy and book through flash sales and things like that. I have a couple of bigger ships coming up soon, that I found good deals on. But in general, the bigger ships are newer, they have more to offer, they have more costs overall, they're more expensive to operate. So inevitably, they come at a higher price point. And so yeah, that's something to think about. And that brings me to my next point, and that's that because they spared no expense in creating these ships, they have newer entertainment shows, they use technology, things like that. But a lot of those ships do require that you book your shows in advance. Usually when you first get on board, that's going to be one of the first things you do. I've even heard of people having to do that before they even embark the ship, like for restaurants and stuff, which is crazy to me. But yeah, the venues do sell out, like on the Oasis class ships. If you want to do the Aqua shows, you got to make sure you reserve those in advance because walk-in space is almost never a thing. And to me, that kind of takes away away from the experience. It makes it feel less streamlined. You have to be in an app all day long to make sure you're not missing stuff and that you've booked what you need to book and all of that. I'm not a fan of that, but I do love the shows. The Aqua show on Oasis of the Seas is one of the best things I've ever seen on a cruise ship. It was super interactive, super awesome, super amazing, spectacular, all of that. But yeah, we had to book that show in advance. They did have one show get canceled also, so I don't know what happened with those people. I would be pretty frustrated if that were me. Luckily, our show happened and we really enjoyed it. But yeah, something to think about for sure. And the next thing is that more bars and venues equals a busier vibe. This may be more your speed. Some people like a more lively environment and don't want, direct immediate interaction and attention, and they don't want to be sitting in a venue alone, awkwardly in the corner. So for you, that may be a good thing, but for some people, they really enjoy that intimate vibe that the smaller ships offer in their bars and interacting with the bartender and, not having to wait too long for a drink and all of that. So yeah, you will have more venue options as well as more unique options like the Bionic Bar on the Oasis class ships. It's super cool to get a drink from a robot, but yeah, that does come at the expense of having that more intimate feel that you get on a smaller ship. And the last thing I want to say is that while you'll have endless activities, it can be overwhelming to be on a larger ship. As I said already, there's so much to do that you may have a hard time keeping up. You got to keep your app fired up and ready to go and check the schedule often because it's constantly changing and updating and things are being added in, and go to the activities and see what's available when and all of that because there is a lot to do. You'll never be bored. I always say that for first time cruisers it makes sense for them to book a mid-range ship so that they can kind of get the best of both worlds and see what they like and don't like and adjust from there. If my first cruise had been on Oasis of the Seas and I was solo and all of that stuff, I don't know that I would have liked it that much. I would have maybe felt intimidated. And the other thing about Oasis of the Seas, my mother-in-law, that was her first cruise ship, and she was lost constantly. She didn't know how to get anywhere without us. She couldn't find our room and things like that. I got used to the layout of the ship, and so after a couple of days, Carlos and I were good to go with that. But even on like Meraviglia and other ships that are larger, you sometimes end up in a hallway that you think is the correct one, and you're on the wrong side of the ship or the wrong end of the ship. So something to keep in mind if you've never sailed before or if you've only sailed on smaller ships. There is a lot more room to get turned around and lost on those big ships. And so yeah. And I'll go ahead and just close things out with some final thoughts. I prefer medium ships. I'm not a huge fan of the super small ones, and I've also struggled with the super large ones. I'm always able to have fun no matter which ship I'm on, but the vibe from the smallest ship I've ever been on, which I believe is Vision of the Seas, to the largest ship I've been on, Oasis of the Seas, could not be any more different. The people on board is different, the entertainment is different, the focus of activities is different. You may go on one ship and absolutely hate it, and then a year later go on a different ship and it's the best thing you've ever done in your whole life, So I hope that you found this video helpful. If you've sailed before and have some thoughts on this, feel free to comment those down below. Open that discussion for people in the comments. The idea of this channel is to be as positive as possible while helping people navigate the world of traveling, in this case, cruise travel. So yeah, I guess that's it. I want to thank you all so much for traveling with me. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all those fun things. We'll talk soon, and y'all have a good night.